Kentaro Miura was a legend. He was a man who created a series that's come to define the dark fantasy genre and made massive swords a staple of any kind of fictional franchise with a medieval setting. It's thanks to him that most manga series today aren't afraid to push the boundaries of what's acceptable to their extremes, and it was a massive blow to the entire community when he unexpectedly passed away in 2021. Rest in peace, Kentaro Miura. While Berserk has continued publication after his death, thanks to his best friend and fellow mangaka Kuji Mori taking over as series director, one question continues to plague the minds of Berserk diehards. When will Guts' story come to an end? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore in this video, so without further ado, this is the truth about Berserk's final arc explained. How far along is Berserk? This question is almost philosophical in nature at this point because since the series resumed under Mori in 2021, we've only gotten about 20 chapters over the course of 4 years. The final chapter ever penned by Miura himself was chapter 364, which ended with Griffith's unexpected invasion of Elfhelm. Many fans believe that even if the story had ended right there, it would have been just fine, because hauntingly enough, Miura-sensei closed out Berserk 364 with a single teardrop coming off of the face of Griffith as he reminisced about a nostalgic warmth enveloping him whenever he transformed into the Moonlight Boy on nights of the full moon. The raw emotion that panel evoked within us would have marked the perfect ending for a series that no longer had a creator, and while we agree that the scene focusing on Griffith makes us feel disgusting for even saying that, emotions don't always make sense. They go from one extreme to the other quite easily, and that's doubly true for a series like Berserk, where even its protagonist isn't safe from experiencing bouts of intense and borderline evil emotions. After the release of Chapter 364, Berserk fans were in a state of limbo because none of us knew if the series was even going to continue or not, but it did, and Mori picked up right where Miura left off, by showing us how Guts chose to deal with the sudden appearance of his arch-nemesis. And while it's true that there's no end in sight for Berserk, that doesn't mean we can't make an estimation regarding the same. This is because we do know how far along the story is in terms of progression. In fact, we've known that since 2009. Back then, Miura-sensei was working on bringing the Millennium Falcon arc to its epic world-changing conclusion with the triggering of what's now known as the Great Roar of the Astral World, and in one of his rare in-person interviews, he revealed that his magnum opus was around 60 to 70% finished, with the end not too far away from Griffith's triumph outside of Falconia. These comments came around the time that Volume 30 of the series was being published, so technically speaking, Berserk should have been over by now. 2025 saw the release of Volume 43 of Berserk, which is the second volume to not be written or illustrated by Miura-sensei. If you align that with the time at which those comments were made, it's more likely that Berserk was actually barely 60% done back in 2009. And that makes sense for a couple of reasons, the first of which is the Gardner-style approach that Miura took to his storyline. In that regard, he was a lot like another famous fantasy author who's notorious for constantly pushing back deadlines these days, George R.R. Martin. When Martin released the first book of his magnum opus, A Game of Thrones, the year was 1996. The first two Thrones sequel books followed in quick succession. A Clash of Kings was released in 98, and A Storm of Swords was released in the year 2000. After Storm, though, Martin became stuck on what's now known within his fandom as the infamous 5-year gap. Initially, he planned on including a time skip that would have aged up his characters significantly and made their participation in some of the things that happen in A Dance with Dragons feel not so icky, shall we say. But he quickly realized that while this might pan out for his main characters, for others it simply wouldn't. So he scrapped that idea and wrote the bridge book A Feast for Crows, which picks up directly after Storm, and pushed back Dance from being the second book to the fourth book and then the fifth book in the Song of Ice and Fire series. A Feast for Crows was published in 2005, which is significantly longer than 2 years, and Dance was finally released in 2011. The entire waiting period between Feast and Dance was as long as the publication cycle for the first 3 novels in that series, and though Martin first promised The Winds of Winter back in 2014, it's been 14 years and the novel still hasn't been released. Now, we don't know if Kentaro Miura was even aware of Martin's work and his now infamous hiatuses, but we do know that their publishing schedules are oddly similar. Up until the year 2000, Berserk was a regular weekly published seinen manga, with readers of the Young Animal magazine feasting on new chapters every 7 days. But after the turn of the millennium, the gap between chapter releases widened by a large margin, and the Millennium Falcon arc was probably his longest-running story arc in terms of the sheer amount of time it took him to get it done. Then came the Fantasia arc, and we kid you not, for several years, Berserk fans were stuck on a boat, which is basically manga purgatory at this point, and so that's why we make this comparison between the two artists. While Miura did say that Berserk was over halfway done in 2009, his Gardner style of creation meant that he only knew the broad strokes of how he wanted his series to end. Martin, too, knows what he wants his final set pieces to look like. It's just the journey to that last battle that's kept him tangled in a web of his own words for well over a decade now. Berserk became increasingly experimental with its narrative style and aesthetic after the conclusion of the heavily acclaimed Conviction arc, because post-Conviction, Miura properly introduced magic to his series. And with magic came mages, a whole magic system, and the need to draw locations that weren't as traumatizing or macabre as the Eclipse's landscape. You can see how his artwork progresses even as he transitions from the Golden Age to Conviction, because the Golden Age's art is a lot more hand-drawn, for lack of a better term. It feels rough around the edges in the best way possible, and the Conviction arc was when Miura truly perfected the design that he wanted the rest of his series to carry. So, while you'll see many videos and online forum posts about how Berserk is supposed to end with chapter 410, the reality is that that estimation is no longer set in stone. The only person who could have given us a definitive answer is no longer with us, and considering his last pen chapter marked the beginning of Griffith's Elfhelm invasion, we think that there was still a lot more material he wanted to get out there before he finally concluded his story. So, considering the fact that the latest Berserk chapter is chapter 383, we feel confident saying that the series will probably not conclude in about 27 chapters, because it would be extremely difficult to tie up all the loose ends that have been dangling right in front of us since 2021. Berserk might actually be around 60 to 70% finished as of now, considering how long ago those comments were made, but like we've pointed out, that estimation came from a gardener who didn't plan everything out methodically. Having said that, that brings us to another question on fans' minds, and that is, where is the Eastern Exile arc in Berserk's storyline? So, the Eastern Exile arc is interesting because it's the first arc that has been completely under the direction of Mori. He picked up Berserk as the Fantasia arc was winding down, and he directed the last 10 chapters of what has been the longest arc in Berserk history in terms of how long it took to complete. The Eastern Exile arc officially started with chapter 374 and has had around 10 installments since it began, but it's already one of the most intriguing storylines of the series because of what it represents. After Miura-sensei's death, the fanbase was sort of divided on whether Berserk should even continue publication or not. While many fans see Mori's work as being inferior to Miura's and regularly criticize it, others have enjoyed the continuation and the faithfulness with which Mori is continuing Berserk to honor his late best friend. Say what you want about the guy, but the fact that we're getting any more Berserk chapters at all is thanks to him, because there was a time where Studio Gaga and Miura's editors were considering publishing some of his illustrations and rough drafts for the final chapters of his series and calling it a day. These drawings would have been published in the form of a 5 to 10 page leaflet, and if you ask us, the fact that we get the Eastern Exile arc instead is a massive improvement on this initial idea, especially because it's staying true to Miura's original vision. For those of you who might not know who Mori is, we recommend that you go and read the tribute chapter he wrote for Miura shortly after his passing, because that does a better job of highlighting their relationship than we'll ever be able to do. Miura was the man who inspired Mori to continue producing manga when he was about to give up on everything, and it's safe to say that Berserk exists in the form it does today because of Miura's relentless belief in his friend's capabilities. As for where it sits in the chronology of things, the way that the arc has been titled and is unfolding, we'd say that the Eastern Exile arc is most likely the penultimate arc of Berserk. We say this because of what the word exile means and represents, which is essentially banishment from one's home, especially when one has committed some sort of crime. Now, we all know Guts is no criminal, at least not in the sense that we think of criminals in the world of Berserk. If anything, Griffith is the one who should be exiled because of the multiple heinous acts he's committed in his lifetime, both as a human being and now as a god hand. But why it fits Guts' story is because he's going through a sort of self-imposed exile right now. Ever since Griffith invaded Elfhelm, destroyed the island community, and kidnapped Casca, Guts has been spiraling hard. He's entered the pits of despair in a way we've never seen before, because in the past, no matter how sad or angry he got, Guts could always work through his emotions by swinging his sword around until he exhausted his body and emptied his mind. This time, that approach failed him. thanks to Griffith's divine powers. Mori's first chapter as Berserk director saw Guts trying to cut Griffith down to size, as he did with Slan way back in chapter 220 and 21, but because of Griffith's ability to seemingly phase in and out of existence, Guts couldn't even land a proper hit on him. He was let down by his sword and his skill as a swordsman, and he's retreated into his own mind ever since that fateful day. The Eastern Exile arc takes him all the way to the other side of the world, where he's currently trying to work his way through the myriad thoughts and emotions plaguing his psyche, because a dejected and confused Guts is more dangerous than one who walks this earth with clear purpose. And the reason we say that this arc is most likely the penultimate installment of the series is because before everything is said and done, Guts will have to go back home to Wyndham, to Midland, to where his story began in earnest. Berserk is a story about full circle moments. Guts' story is a reflection of Skull Knight's, which is what started this whole saga in the first place. He's doing all the things Skull Knight couldn't, like saving his girl from the clutches of demons and not letting himself go completely just for the sake of fulfilling his dream. Right now, Guts is inside the Kushan Stupa, and he's been pulled into the astral world because, according to Daiba, when a person can't see or sense anything externally, the only place they can turn their gaze is inside. That implies that Guts is going through a self-enlightenment journey where he will finally accept the things that he hasn't been accepting about himself for a long time and emerge a better, stronger, and freer man. So what do you do once you've conquered your demons in a fictional story? You go back to the source and you confront your past with the strength you previously lacked. That's why the Eastern Exile arc is the penultimate Berserk story arc in our opinion, because it's meant to set up what happens in the final arc after all our main characters get their affairs in order. So now that we have that out of the way, let's finally talk about when and how Berserk will actually end. When will Berserk actually end, and what will happen in the final arc? When Kujimori first took over directorship of Berserk, he stated that it wouldn't take him more than a decade to finish Miura's magnum opus because he had a strict vision for the continuation in his mind. Mori has stated on multiple occasions that he's only going to illustrate and write what Miura told him about the series' ending during conversations they had about 30 years ago. It's been quite a while since then, and Berserk has evolved in directions that Miura had probably not even considered back in the 90s, but Mori says that his vision for the series' ending never changed. New characters showed up, sure, but he had an idea of how he was going to weave their tales into the finale as well, and that's also the reason the most recent chapters of Berserk have been lacking in dialogue. If you read through the last 20 chapters of the series, you'll notice that many of the chapters have minimal dialogue, both internal and external, and the latest chapter has a grand total of about 6 lines being exchanged between 2 characters. This drop-off in written content is because Mori wants to stay true to Miura's own words and has said that if he doesn't know or recall the specific dialogue that a particular scene demands, then he just won't include it in the series. Of course, that doesn't mean that he hasn't taken at least some creative liberty with his continuation of Berserk, because it would be impossible to only include dialogue that was discussed at a time when characters like Shirke and Daiba weren't even a proper part of the story. But, for the most part, Mori has tried to stick to what he knows and doesn't want to deviate too far from his late best friend's vision. This also means, however, that unlike what we said in the first segment of this video, there's a big possibility that Berserk will end with, or even before, chapter 410, because if he's only going to work on what he knows, then there's no scope for Gardner-style creation over here. And besides, the Eastern Exile arc isn't even the shortest arc in Berserk history, because the Black Swordsman arc, which introduced Berserk to the world, was a mere 9 chapters long. So, if we combine Mori's public statements and the pace that he's working at, and the fact that 410 chapters seems to have been the original end goal for the series, it's possible that Berserk might end within the next 27 chapters. But we still think that the series might continue beyond that number because of the many loose ends that still need to be tied up. We still need to see characters like Sonya and Mule realize the truth about Griffith. We still need to see how Casca will be rescued from Falconia. The epic battle between good and evil is still left, which can't be covered entirely within a handful of chapters. Heck, we haven't even seen what happened with Shirke's mission to Falconia, so, in our opinion, the Eastern Exile arc will cover the Doomsday preparation portion of the final battle. Guts has already entered the Kushan Stupa, where he will be reborn with a renewed sense of purpose, and the last time we saw Shirke, her luminous body was right outside Falconia. things are certainly picking up towards a resolution within the storyline, even if we're not getting frequent chapter updates from the team at Studio Gaga. After the Exile in the East ends with the good guys and the Kushan Empire creating a united front against Griffith, the final arc will cover only the battle between Guts and Griffith, as well as their respective allies. Guts will win, of course, because Kentaro Miura learned storytelling by drinking in Star Wars and George Lucas's adaptation of the hero's journey trope. He has stated that he wanted a happy ending for Berserk in the past, and that he wouldn't leave us hanging with a crappy compromise where the good guys and the bad guys both come to a bittersweet stalemate. Plus, what good would Luke Skywalker's story have been if he hadn't defeated Vader and retired at the end of the original trilogy? Additionally, it's our belief that there will be an epilogue chapter after the battle concludes to show us the journey that our characters will go on once the primary threat has been dealt with. That's quite a common occurrence for manga series because mangakas love to flash forward to the future and show us just how well or how poorly their characters are doing after the main story is over. In an ideal world, Guts would retire as a mercenary and open up a training school of some kind, with Isidro being his star pupil and the new 100-man slayer of legend. Casca will be his co-instructor and wife, Serpico will be a teacher at the academy, and Farnace might end up marrying Roderick and financing the whole endeavor with that sweet, sweet Van Diemen bank money. The Holy See will be eradicated, and humanity will return to the way things were before the God Hand ever came into the picture, only this time, arcane powers won't be used for evil, because the idea of evil itself will be rooted out of human society. Shirke could become a Flora-like figure for the new generation of mages, steering them towards a world where exploration is good, but exploitation is evil, and the very concept of fate as it stands today will be killed literally. Humans will be free to make their own destinies forever after, which is something the story has been hinting at since it began. Because why would Guts be called the Struggler if his destiny is to succumb to fate in direct opposition to his entire story, which shows time and again that he's a leaping fish who cuts through the causal current? For as unconventional as it is, Berserk might just have the most conventional ending of all time, and it's just as well because we don't think our hearts could take any more twists and turns coming from a series that throws them our way non-stop. Marvelous verdict! But as for whether everything we've just said is 100% rock-solid truth, well, the thing is, we don't know, and we can't know. All we can do is speculate, but we're confident in our ability to break down all things Berserk, as you guys know well, and this is what we think about Berserk nearing its end, what that ending might look like, and what will happen in the final arc when we finally see it. Let us know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Berserk content. We'll see you guys again with another video real soon, so until then, stay safe, and remember to keep on struggling, strugglers.